We have time for a little bit of Q&A. Is there a mic around? Yeah. Yeah, I think right here. Second row.
The Indian healthcare system is one of the best in the world, the delivery of healthcare. Indian IT is obviously one of the best in the world. Yet, the use of IT in healthcare system is pathetically low. Every sixth human in the world lives in India, and every one of us from the cradle to the grave have to go to a doctor. Could someone explain why we are just not using, I'm a doctor, medical doctor, why we are just not using IT in healthcare compared to all the other industries, particularly because the healthcare industry is obviously the biggest in the world with 1,200 million clients.
No, I think, shall I sit here or is that working? Yeah, okay. Awesome. You know, I think what you're asking is the question that I'm also trying to ask. I don't agree that Indian healthcare is the best in the world. I don't think so. Mainly for two different reasons. I think there's some room for technical excellence, though I must say the level of technical excellence today is dramatically better than what it used to be even 30, 40 years ago. But aside from the fact that there remain some opportunities of expansion there, the reach of the Indian healthcare system is so limited that we really can't say that it's the best healthcare system. We could say that it has a high level of technical excellence. On the other hand, the reach is terribly limited. Very odd, you know, I spent some time looking at the history of China and Indian mutual interest in healthcare. And one of the, I mean, this is a subject on which the Chinese and Indians have written for the last 2,000 years. One of the detailed reports that came from Fahian, which now is written as Faxian in Pinyin. I'm never quite certain how to pronounce that, but I take it the spelling could not change the Chinese pronunciation, so I'll call it Fahian. He came in 401 AD, and he spent a lot of time in Patna, in Pataliputra. And then in the 7th century came Yi Jin, and in his book on India, 3 chapters are on the Indian healthcare and medical system. Yi Jin provided a kind of integrated assessment of the comparison. Basically came down to the view, as far as technical excellence is concerned, that the Indians have some achievement, but the Chinese have more. On the other hand, as far as the reach of public healthcare system is concerned, the Chinese were very limited, whereas Yi Jin, following what Fahian had already said, had 300 years earlier, had a much bigger reach. Now, in some ways, what we have now is almost the exact opposite. Our technical excellence have become dramatically high, but our reach have fallen. In fact, even Fahian's description of Patna, about how everyone could get free medical access, seems in sharp contrast with what might happen in Patna right now. So that in some ways there is even a regression. But I think your question is absolutely central. It's a huge industry. It has great merits, the healthcare. It has unevenness, and that strengthens your question, because that unevenness gives a greater role to IT. And so what you're doing is to ask the question, not so much just why is it the case, but just to say, how can we diagnose it, address it, and make things better? I think it's that we have to address. So I'm really delighted that you have taken the discussion in that direction.
I have a question for Prof. Sen. You know, the IT sector has obviously provided the basis for low-cost communication and the ability for people to express themselves. To what extent they are heard, of course, is an issue because there's so much information out there. But my question is more towards driving change amongst the Asian countries on a global basis. And it seems to me that collectively the Asian countries, I come from Malaysia, and the smaller companies, in our DNA there's a fear of vulnerability that, you know, by expressing something we we become vulnerable. There is also the, respect thy father syndrome, so one doesn't want to be overly aggressive in overturning, opinions made by doctors, parents, older people, etc. So it is in our DNA not to raise issues. I don't see that changing, and I wonder whether, Prof, you had some comment on that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I'm, as I said in my keynote address, I'm very much an outsider as yet, though I'm learning quite rapidly. Last 3 days have been very educational for me in attending the NASSCOM meeting. My reading of it isn't that the IT activists and leaders have been very hesitant to ask questions. I think it's true that there is a kind of role issue as to, is it our role? Kiran rightly said, well, maybe politics in other countries is not our role, and I can understand that. And yet, in some level, the IT sector has had from a background point of view, two really great assets. One of which Mr. Srivastava was mentioning to me, whispering to me a few minutes ago. But I begin with the other. The other is the fact that it's a very new industry, and it's come by questioning received wisdom. There is a willingness to say, why are these things done this way? If that question was not asked, I don't think we have had any of the innovations of the IT sector that we ended up having. I think if one wanted a vindication of something that Francis Bacon said 400 and now 400 and I think 4 years ago, in a lovely essay called On Doubt, actually called Off Doubts, I think, saying that doubts are very important, not just because what is being doubted may be wrong, but that is the only way of taking a new initiative, creating something which would not have otherwise happened. So to let, as his Bacon's language, get something passed without being challenged, without being engaged, is not a way for human progress. The doubts are very central. And I think the IT sector has really flourished on that, and being a new industry as well as an intellect-driven industry, that had been natural. The input in the IT sector has tended to be much more, and here I take some pride, the academic content has been much higher than almost any other industry one can think of. It has been a very much a grey cells invasion in the business world, and that it certainly gives us great advantage. The second, and that's the thing that Saurabh was telling me, and I agreed with him also very much, and I've also tried to write a little about that, that the IT sector, if you look at this class background, it's not a traditional, people come from all kinds of classes, but it's not as traditional of people born in wealth and who are making goods and who, expand what they have inherited, convert a trading business into some. There have been some examples too of that. But on the other hand, many of them are people who are actually not the traditional business enterprise class, but came from middle class families, but ended up playing this major role. I know that among some of when I go to Silicon Valley, I'm always impressed how many of my students whom I taught in Delhi School of Economics and never thought they're going to be entrepreneurs, rather than writing rather nice essays in economics, have ended up being very successful entrepreneurs. And I think that also gives a level of vision, which is, I think, quite remarkable. But I think your question is still right, namely, if it is the case that the IT sector is not being sufficiently irreverential, that is sufficiently lacking in respect, quote unquote, and I mean it very positively, to question whatever